add a title. Come on, give me a chance to add a title. Good morning and welcome to the LGBTQ Northwest Indiana PFLAG Crown Point TV. Your hosts today are Mari Victoria and Elizabeth Menning. Welcome to your own show, as I always start out the show, and I hope you've had a great day so far.
Yes, we have.
Thank you. I hope you have as well.
That's good to hear. So we're really looking forward to this, hearing the information you have to share. So I'll turn over the show to you.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Bill, and welcome to LGBTQ Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV.
We are showing every 2 weeks on Thursdays from 11 to 12, and we'll provide a little bit more on the schedule later.
And we are happy to have Bill and the Bill and Callie Show produce for us, along with the support of their sponsors. My name is Amari Victoria, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
And I'm Elizabeth Menning. I also go by she, her, hers.
Today, unfortunately, we don't have any guests for you. We had intended to have a guest today, but we're working on it very soon.
Yep. So as always, we're going to bring you topics and news important to the LGBTQ and ally community members here in Northwest Indiana. So whether you identify as LGBTQ yourself, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, or if you consider yourself an ally, or if you're supporting somebody you know who is LGBTQ, the show is for you.
And today we will start out with some news highlights. I actually have a pretty good crop of news items today.
We'll give you a little bit of more push on voting here in 2020 and on the smoking cessation.
And we will talk about our feature topic for today, which is gender expression.
And a little bit about what it means to be non-binary. We're going to dive into that label there.
I have a item today about a LGBTQ related day that occurs in July every year. We'll talk about that a little bit.
And then, as always, we'll give you some regional announcements, Pride updates, other events and activities, and some of the virtual support and community meetings that you can attend.
If I don't know if we have a
we don't
resource. Oh, no resource for today. I'm sorry. We will work on bettering that.
Yeah, sometimes we highlight a local, regional, or national resource, and we do provide phone numbers and helpline numbers there at the end. So that would be our focus on that one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get into it.
All right.
Let's talk about news items. Very first item today is an unfortunate one. It's a trend that is continuing and absolutely must stop. 3 Black trans women were killed or disappeared this month as the violence skyrockets nationwide. 3 Black transgender women have either been killed or disappeared so far this July, following the month of June, where 4 Black transgender women were killed. Bree Black, the 27-year-old of Pompano Beach, Florida, was shot on July 3rd. Police said they responded to a report of the shooting and found Black with a gunshot wound. 10 minutes later, when fire rescue showed up, she was pronounced dead. Police are searching for the people who killed her. The second one, the body of Black transgender woman Shaky Peters, 32-year-old, was found near a road in St. Helena Parish, Louisiana. Police believe her death was a homicide, and the St. Helena Parish Sheriff's Office said that they are investigating a person of interest, but have not said what they believe is the motive. The St. Helena Parish Sheriff's Office identified Peters as a male. Very unfortunate. Lastly, the family of 21-year-old Black transgender woman Dawn Manson is looking for her, saying that they last heard from her on the evening of July 2nd when she sent a text to family saying she was depressed and having trouble with a man. Dawn was last seen in the San Francisco area, but her family said that her phone showed that she was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where her family is now searching for her.
So, Mary, where do you get your news stories from?
All the news is provided by LGBTQ Nation. I will be branching out in the future to other news outlets.
Yes, there's quite a few good ones out there, so good to know.
And just to finish the story, 18 transgender people were killed in 2020 by the end of June, according to HRC. 4 Black transgender women were killed in June: Brayla Stone, Mercy Mack, Dominique Fells, and Rhea Milton. Next story is House Democrats demand military end the ban on trans troops in light of Supreme Court decision. House Democrats are asking the military to end Donald Trump's transgender military ban in light of the Supreme Court's recent decision, which said that Title VII's ban on discrimination because of sex includes discrimination against LGBTQ people. The letter, sent by Representative Susan Delbean and signed by 116 Democratic members of Congress, says that the transgender military ban is an attack on transgender service members who are risking their lives to serve our country. In 2017, Trump tweeted that the military was going to ban transgender people from serving openly, and last year the ban went into effect. Transgender service members are required to serve as their sex assigned at birth and can't access gender-affirming health care while in the military. People diagnosed with gender dysphoria can't even join the military unless they show that they are medically stable as their sex assigned at birth for 3 years. That's absolutely a stab in the heart to every transgender person who is interested in joining the military and transgender people in general.
Completely disrespectful.
The ban sparked 4 federal lawsuits that have had some early victories in the court, but didn't prevent the ban from being implemented. The 4 lawsuits challenging the ban on open transgender military service on the grounds that violates the Due Process Clause in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution is like the Title VII prohibition on sex-based discrimination. The letter accuses Trump of prolonging the litigation and urges the Department of Defense to lift the ban and the Department of Justice to settle the lawsuits. Jennifer Dane of the Modern Military Association America said, "It's crucial that the Department of Defense remove this unconstitutional transgender military ban and ensure any qualified patriot is able to serve. Thousands of transgender service members have already more than proven themselves with honor and distinction that this discriminatory barrier that has nothing to do with their ability to accomplish the mission must be taken down."
Absolutely.
Next item, will Chicago's LGBTQ neighborhood change its name? Boys Town is the only gendered name in America for a queer neighborhood. Chicago's Boys Town may get a new name if community activists get their way. The name was given to the area by the local business association in the 1990s. The board of the organization, the North Halstead Business Alliance, is all male. The name started as a joke, but as time passed, it became the standard name of the neighborhood at the time when gay men dominated the area. A petition to the board reads, "As we all grow and reconsider our roles in perpetuating bigotry, we ask that this board reflect on the growing number of incidents in our LGBTQ spaces. One form of bigotry perpetrates others. The area has been plagued with problems of racism and transphobia over the years. Most American gay areas are named for the neighborhood they're in, like the Castro, West Hollywood, Greenwich Village, or the Montrose. An update to the story, business leaders have agreed to consider changing the name of Chicago's LGBTQ neighborhood, Boys Town. The process will likely take a few months as we listen to the community feedback and engage in broad-based efforts beyond just a possible name change, but a commitment to learning how to ensure the neighborhood moves forward as an inclusive and welcoming neighborhood for all. Next story from let's call it a worldwide story here. Gabon's legislature repeals the ban on homosexuality. Gabon's Senate has voted to end the country's ban on homosexuality.
Where is that country?
It is a country in Africa.
Thank you.
The National Assembly and the Central African nation voted in favor of a bill that would legalize sexual relationships between two people of the same sex. The Senate passed the law with 59 votes. 17 senators voted against the bill and 4 abstained. The repeal bill now goes to President Ali Bongo, who is expected to sign it. Gabon's ban on homosexuality was passed quietly in the summer of 2019, creating a punishment of up to 6 months in prison for homosexuality. The law of 2019 was quickly used to persecute LGBTQ people in the Christian majority country, according to local activists. The Senate in Gabon passed the bill with a large majority in a closed-door session, so the senator's reasoning is not known. Sylvia Bongo, the wife of the president, has said that the ability to love freely is a fundamental human right. And we here agree with that totally.
Absolutely.
Our next story is a good one. Netherlands plans to remove gender from ID cards entirely.
Cool.
The Netherlands will stop including any gender marker at all on identification cards. Several countries, including India, Australia, and Canada, as well as the Netherlands, already allow people to choose an X gender marker, but this move in the Netherlands will stop including any gender marker at all on ID. Minister of Education, Culture and Science Ingrid van Engelshoven announced in a letter to the Dutch legislature that gender markers will be removed from the ID cards after research into the matter found that the cost of doing so is limited. She wrote, "Citizens can shape their own identity and propagate it in complete freedom and security. The move is part of a broader plan to limit the need for gender identification in government paperwork." She noted that Germany's ID cards omit gender already. The groups COC Nederland, and NID and TNN called the change great news for people who have problems with indication of sex on their identity documents. Van Engelshoven's letter said that the only cost of the change would be training for police and other workers who check ID. The change will be implemented in 2024 or 2025, and it will not apply to passports.
That's a long time from now.
All right, our next story is the first case of HIV in remission in breakthrough trial for a cure. Researchers say that HIV has gone into remission in a man who was treated with a new cocktail of medications. A 34-year-old Brazilian man who was diagnosed with HIV in 2012 started antiretroviral therapy, ART, and was given other medications, which included nicotinamide, a form of vitamin B3. He said he was given that treatment for 48 weeks and then stopped taking the medications. 57 weeks later, HIV DNA could not be found in his cells, and HIV tests came back negative. The result is highly likely not reproducible. 4 other people received the same treatment, but it did not put HIV into remission for them. Only a handful of people have seen their HIV go into remission in the last 2 decades, including the, quote, Berlin patient 12 years ago. In his case, he received a bone marrow transplant as treatment for leukemia from a donor with a mutated gene for the CCR5 protein. If you want to know what that is, you'll have to look it up. He has since tested negative for the virus. In 2019, researchers announced that they were able to cure the HIV in 2 other people. In both cases, the people living with HIV received a bone marrow transplant from someone with a mutated CCR5 protein. Bone marrow transplants are risky, of course, and not a practical solution for most people living with HIV. This announcement represents the first person known to be cured of HIV through medication.
No, I think we should wait.
Okay, and that
Yeah,
is
that's the time.
all that's in the news that I have for you today.
All right. Thank you, Amari. So we just wanted to put a plug in for voting this year. Again, very, very important to get your voice in there. We announced some statistics last time at the appalling number of people. Well, the percentage of people who voted and didn't vote was pretty amazing. So we need people to get out there and get their voice heard, because there's so many issues at stake this year. Regardless, I mean, it happens every time we have an election. If you don't make a vote, then you aren't contributing to
Your voice is
your voice.
heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. Even if you don't think that your single vote won't, if you think it won't count, it actually does. So there's a way to register online at indianavoters.com or indianavoters.in.gov. You just need a valid Indiana driver's license or a Indiana state issued ID card. And you can do a variety of tasks there on the website, submitting a new voter registration, checking on your existing voter registration, validating your status, finding your polling location, etc. And I know that, Bill, you're going to be doing quite a lot of publicizing of voting too, and are going to be talking with Rise NWI, which is one of our regional groups. Did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, actually tonight at 8 o'clock, we are going to air a show where I asked them to come on and present the same data that they just recently did on a show that they had. And it was compelling. 23% was the voter turnout. And then the other stark reality was, the participation in mail-in votes that you would expect to be high during the COVID pandemic were not substantial. There were actually more people that showed up for the day of primary to vote than out of all those other categories, which is kind of disturbing. If you're in a pandemic and you're still when the primary is being held, when the stay-at-home order is still in effect.
Oh, I know.
That's what I would do. So we have talked to Rise NWI, and we are going to provide a platform for them to provide information about voting, constantly reminding people how to register to vote if they are not registered, how to apply for mail-in voting, and also talk about accessing voting possibilities as we get closer to the election. Our whole hopes are that we will make sure at least that people know how to vote, what they vote for. I'd say I'll give you an example that really gets me emotional, because I've seen these really go south in many ways. Whenever there is a referendum, many people don't vote on referendums, but yet when they get their tax bill, then things change. And I can't tell you how many people do not know a referendum was put in place, or let me back up. A question was put on the ballot, but yet they found out when they open up their first tax bill. So that's just an excellent example. That a tax bill should not be the thing that influences you to vote. What should be influencing you to vote is the people, your elected official that you're calling on to represent you to run either the town, the municipality that you're located in, the county or state, or in this case, the nation. We all have an opportunity to take part in that, and the fact that you don't is troublesome. But that's what we're going to do, is to make sure people know, even if you can't get to the voting booth on the day of the election, there are a whole host of opportunities for you to take advantage of. Even if you are disabled and can't get out of your house, I just found out as we're recording the show that the Lake County has a mechanism where they can actually take a voting machine to your house. Now, they can't go into nursing homes for obvious reasons now during the pandemic. Not even family members can go into nursing homes. But we're going to be talking about that and thinking that through, as opposed to just saying these people can't vote. Can we engage a staff member in that senior living center to at least help these people apply for mail-in votes? And they act as the proxy to get them in. So I'm more concerned, and this comes from my dad. My dad was a big advocate. If someone didn't vote in his precinct, he knew about it and went to visit and ask them why. He's phenomenal as far as an advocate for voting. And I guess that's a genetic trait he passed on to me. Because when I saw the numbers, I began saying, gosh, we have the largest complainers, but yet the least amount of people out of that percentage to vote. I mean, more people get on the Facebook and Twitter to complain than we have voters. And, as opposed to pushing that tweet button or the post button, get out there and push the doggone voting button. That's what we're about. That's, what this country is based on. We're the experiment. Well, I've got to say, if I lived in UK right now, I'd say, boy, that experiment is failing. It's okay. I'm going to get a lot of grief for that one.
I find as you were speaking, Bill, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that all the time, whatever party is in power, do everything they can to try to make it so the next election they have a better opportunity to do that. So one of the things they do is gerrymandering, which is the reallocating of geographic spaces of voters. And they do that in such a way to hopefully give them an advantage in an election. Unfortunately, fallout of that is there's a lot of areas that have a lot of people of color that are sort of cast by the wayside, that their votes aren't important, which is a really horrible situation. And I was reading recently another way that voters are being suppressed in even primaries is the closing of polling locations. In many places, they're being closed with the reasoning of COVID-19 or some other people-related issue. But what that effectively is doing is causing a larger number of voters in a larger geographical area to have to travel to like the only voting location that is available to them. I believe, my numbers may be wrong, but they're close. In Georgia, there was an area that originally had 317 places to vote, that they closed 316 of them. So for that same area, there was only one polling place that they could go to. Yeah. Another thing I'd like to mention is that because of COVID-19, of course, mail-in voting, absentee voting has become used more. And if this COVID-19 situation doesn't improve by the November election, it's my belief and many others' belief that we should be allowed to use mail-in voting as a default. Mm-hmm. Now, I know there have been claims that that is a method by which fraudulent voting can happen, but guess what? Fraudulent voting can happen no matter what mechanism you use. So a couple of things that have come into play that come to mind are, one, that of course, with the lack of funding for the U.S. Postal Service, that can affect our mail-in voting capability. If the U.S. Postal Service doesn't survive and dies as an institution, mail-in voting would become much more difficult. And in that vein, of course, people can become activists for certain things, whether it's justice for Breonna Taylor's death or the U.S. Postal Service, as an example. There's a website that I'm a member of called change.org, change.org, where you can electronically sign petitions that have been raised by common folk all over the United States. And one of the petitions that I signed was for the ability to do mail-in voting for the November election across the board, across the nation. I don't remember how many signatures it's gotten so far, but there is also an opportunity once you sign a petition to contribute either financially or by sharing that petition to other people to make it more widespread. And it works. There have been petitions that have gotten millions of votes that have been sent to our legislators, sent to the people that matter for whatever case it may be. And people are starting to have to react to that when there's so much interest and involvement in a topic. They have to take action. So yes, the common folk, just by signing a petition, potentially contributing monetarily or by sharing the message, can make a difference in this country.
I apologize. A cat wanted to vote, and I had to. I took away its rights.
We're hoping our cat doesn't come in with some demands for us.
Yeah, boy, what? But yeah, you're so right. I mean, it seems in this day and age, also, with the explosion of technology, and I'm again worried about technology being used for voting purposes, because there is a possibility that it can be easily taken over, hacked, or whatever you want to say. We have to come to some firm agreement on, and if mail-in voting is going to be it, that's got to be it. But I know several countries are so light years ahead that people don't go out to vote, and because of the problem with getting to the polling place, weather can impact it. And in fact, in Porter County, there was a case, you may remember, I think it was in 2017. It was during a local election where they had a problem with the new voting machines. And they also had a problem with people not getting to the polling places to open the polling places up on time, and schools that forgot that it was election day and didn't have staff there to open the doors. So we had voters. So naturally, it was automatically the election board extended the voting time, but yet that there was a party that approached a judge, Porter County Circuit Court judge, demanding that they shut the polls down at 6 o'clock because that was unfair that they allowed those people to vote. And I never saw such an unfair exercise of that, to deny people's right to vote for no fault of their own. People that were at work and, they can't get up early. They have to be, I know many people that get in way before 6 o'clock in the morning and don't get off work till later. And some put in 12-hour days, and, they need that poll to be open later. It's and if they're having polling problems, they have to find some way, maybe having paper ballots ready, something other than turning people away, because in effect that in a sense negates the primary or the election if you deny a person's ability to vote. So
and that is just more support for allowing mail-in voting to occur. so that those people who have difficulties voting don't have difficulties voting.
Right. Yeah. The election boards have to think through this one because stuff happens. Weather happens, pandemics happen, failure in technology happens. So we have to think through this and come up with a solid backup plan. And I'm amazed after centuries of voting that this country has not come up with a backup plan for voting. In the case of a natural disaster or something, it seems like a very simple incident that day, like someone forgetting to open up a polling place or something happening, maybe a flood or something, that we have an advanced society have not figured out a backup plan for that. It seems like we're all scrambling around at the last minute trying to rectify the situation. So yeah, bigger voting accessibility, and that's got to be it, because no better time than this election that people's voices be heard. And there is so much information out there, and I was telling you before the show, there's so much misinformation out there that people play into. I mean, this morning I found 2 false accounts that were just opened up months prior, containing information that was totally invalid, containing a media outlet that didn't even exist. But oh my gosh, it really sets people off. And we can't ask people to be non-reactionary because we're all human, but in a way it does affect our thought process when it comes to election. And that's the other thing that hopefully we're going to have a conversation too with Rise, in that we have to provide a methodology before an election that people truly know what the makeup of that candidate is, or know in depth that there is going to be a referendum, know in depth that there is going to be a question on the ballot, and that they're well educated about the ballot before they show up at the voting machine. These things have to happen in order for us to survive as a democracy. They have to be, we have to have a reinforcement of our rights. And at this point, our rights are being taken away from us. And there has to be an established path that we are reassured that when we show up on election day or primary day, that we can vote. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm all for delay it. Shut it down. Because then no one, I'm serious. It's, and now that we are only looking at 23% turnout, what decisions were not made? Who was not elected because that other percentage didn't show up, but they supported another candidate. So all these questions need to be discussed vigorously and aggressively. So.
And it's important too, because there's been so much rollback of LGBTQ and especially transgender rights and protections, that we really need to advocate for our colleagues and ourselves, and get people in office who will support those protections for LGBTQ people.
Right. And, I want to state this again, and, I'm not going to mention by name, but everyone will know who I'm talking about. It is interesting because, a certain presidential candidate, someone mentioned that he should run for governor. And I said, well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? That we would end up with a governor that its own hate law did not protect. Yeah. We would have a governor that was not protected by our own hate law. Yeah. So these things, this evolution process is frustrating me if you haven't gotten that sense that we are stuck back in the 17th century in our thoughts and our methodologies. That is just bothersome to me. We are further along. We should be further along as human beings, as far as our acceptance, as far as in order for us to survive as a human race, we have to get beyond these issues.
Absolutely.
So,
Amar, do you want to move on
I'll
to her?
put my soapbox underneath my desk.
That's quite right. And I actually have more say,
I
but I'll
know.
refrain.
Host.
We have more
I
sessions.
agree with you wholeheartedly that our election system has to have a firm backup. And the one thing that has been ignored and in fact declined is protection for that voting system.
Mm-hmm.
At least one, maybe two bills that were introduced were declined pertaining to protection of our elections from foreign involvement, which is just disastrous that we even have to think about that.
Right.
Well, one of the things that, and I promise you I'll put my soapbox back after this statement. One of the things that I think that we are due with all these discussions, and as you've seen, so many things got rolled back to the Supreme Court, and justifiably so. That is a means for parties to resolve an issue that have a problem with the way that the law was dealt with at a lower level. That is given. It shouldn't be. But if you look at the number of things that are being brought before the Supreme Court, I would challenge, is it not a time for another constitutional Congress to relook at our Constitution and update it to today's technology, today's society, so that the Supreme Court is not used as a tool? And you could see clearly now, with the appointments, if you have a president that appoints 3 or 4, God forbid, justices that have the same political view as he does, it becomes a dangerous situation if we don't have a constitution that is constantly under question and attack. So we've got to resolve something, and I think it does. In talking to some of my legal friends, we have to get beyond and look at updating and come up with some amendments, because the challenges are going to be continuous. And that's the difficulty in making lower ordinances or state statutes, is if they can be challenged in the Supreme Court, they will. And so, yeah, but okay.
Moving on.
What was the show about?
That's all right.
I mean,
we can
it speaks
for the rest
a
of the show
lot
and then.
to this, because as people change and we begin to evolve, it shames me that lynching is not a hate crime. It absolutely amazed me. Now, I've heard lawyers state why it can't be because of its challenge, but lynching, it is unfathomable to me that we can allow that not to be on the books somehow, in some way, say some fashion. So,
this is that is tied to the way things were done. I hate to blame it on the South, but the South was where there were slave owners and slaves for the most part. That's why we had a civil war. They were, people of color were emancipated. However, it's taken years and decades to undo and erase all of that mistreatment and violence and anything you want. I mean, there's a lot of descriptive words for slavery and its fallout, and that needs to, we need to make changes. Again, we could go on for the rest of the show without any problem about
we're
this topic.
going back to the Civil War, and I think we're constantly reliving the Civil War in this country. I'm sorry, it's over, it's done. We all need to move forward, but we have not. Yeah. We've never moved on from the Civil War.
No, we need to be backtracking now too.
Yeah, in fact, to this day, I still view us as 2 separate states, and that's a shame. The mindset, the methodologies, and at some point, it invalidates the Civil War, where most human life was lost during that war in any campaign, any war in our history, and yet we invalidate it every day, and that's
things definitely need a change.
That's crazy. That's crazy, and we just need to come up with some type of. But we are drifting further and far apart.
Okay, Amari, here, do this next part.
Next item. We would like to remind everyone who is trying to quit smoking or vaping or any kind of tobacco use, about the resources that are available by the state of Indiana, including the 1-800-QUIT-NOW phone number. There, I have printed out, and no one can read that, but on here is listed the services that are provided by the state of Indiana. However, it also includes the list of all the services that can be offered. And across the country, I imagine there are programs that actually do offer those services.
Mm-hmm. And we bring this up constantly because LGBTQ people quite often deal with the non-acceptance and invalidation and disrespect, and maybe are more prevalent to this any sort of substance abuse. So we wanted to bring that up.
And as organizations going forward, any event or meeting that our organizations hold will be designated smoke-free, vape-free events.
Yeah, so that still means that we'll still have like a smoking area outside at large events and that type of thing, but the event itself will be deemed smoke-free.
We realize that there are a lot of LGBTQ people who do resort to smoking. Unfortunately, that turns into an abuse.
Can definitely. So I think, Mari, why don't we postpone the gender expression discussion till the future one, since we've been kind of hitting it heavy recently. And let's jump right to our discussion about non-binary people.
Okay. All right. I did a little research yesterday and found out that this month, this is the LGBTQ historical day, July 14th is known as International Non-Binary Peoples Day. It's observed each year on the 14th of July and is aimed at raising awareness and organizing around the issues faced by non-binary people around the world. This day was first celebrated in 2012. The date was chosen for being precisely between International Men's Day and International Women's Day. How about that?
All right. So most countries in the world do not yet recognize non-binary as a legal gender, meaning that most non-binary people still have a gendered passport and official identification. But as Amari mentioned earlier, countries like Australia, Bangladesh, Canada, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, and New Zealand.
And India.
And India, that's right. Did I miss that one? I'm sorry. They do include non-binary gender options on passports, and there's only 18 out of 50 U.S. states that allow residents to mark their gender as X on their driver's license.
And at one point, very briefly, it was 19 when Indiana was allowing the X gender marker. Non-binary week is, of course, the week surrounding Non-Binary Peoples Day, starting on Monday and ending on Sunday.
So let's define what non-binary means. Binary means that there's two buckets or categories. Most people, including most transgender people, identify either as male or female. But some people do not fit neatly into these categories of man and woman or male and female. So some people have a gender that identity that blends elements of being a man or being a woman, or a gender maybe that is different from being male or female. Some don't identify with any gender, and some people's gender changes over time. We've kind of discussed this in the last couple episodes.
Yes. Why non-binary? Some societies like ours recognize two genders, male and female. The idea that there's only two genders is called the gender binary, because binary means having two parts or two categories. And of course, here it means male or female. Therefore, non-binary is sometimes used to describe genders that do not fall into the two categories of male or female.
Non-binary, that term is one of the most common terms, but you might hear people describe themselves as genderqueer, agender, gender fluid, bigender, those types of things.
Two-spirit.
Two-spirit. So some basic facts about non-binary people. non-binary folks are nothing new. They're not confused about their gender identity. They're not following some kind of fad. Non-binary identities have been recognized for millennia by cultures and societies around the world.
Some, but not all, non-binary people actually do get medical procedures to make their bodies more congruent with their gender identity. While not all non-binary people need medical care to have a fulfilling life, it can be critical and life-saving for many.
And life-saving in the sense that perhaps their gender dysphoria, what they feel like inside, what they're allowed to express outside, don't match and becomes extremely, extremely stressful. So most transgender people, Omari, are not non-binary.
I don't consider myself non-binary.
So some transgender people are, but most transgender people have a gender identity that is either male or female, and they should be treated just like any other man or woman, male or female born with those genitalia.
Something that we haven't really covered, but I'll talk about briefly here. A non-binary is not the same thing as being intersex, intersex being the topic we haven't really talked about. But intersex people have anatomy or genes that don't fit the typical definitions of male and female. Their innate gender identity is something other than male or female. I'm sorry, I skipped around here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was confused.
Let me try that again.
So an intersex person
does not have genes or anatomy that fits into the typical definitions of male or female. Most intersex people identify as either men or women. Non-binary people are not intersex.
Not usually.
Not usually. They're usually born with bodies that may fit typical definitions of male and female, but their gender identity is something other than male or female.
So some non-binary people, for instance, might in the same day at the same time feel like they're got elements of maleness and elements of femaleness. Some might feel male for a week or two, and then they feel more like female for a month. I mean, it changes, it fluxes. And others just don't feel that they fit anywhere on the binary spectrum, and they're just somewhere, on the binary, and they fit somewhere in between.
Honestly, I don't label myself as non-binary, but I've never considered myself to be on the female binary. I'm somewhere just off of that. My gender identity drives me to work towards that female identity, towards the gender expression of a woman. But I don't feel that my identity lies exactly on the binary pole.
And actually, in reality, I think very few people actually lie on the far ends of that spectrum.
I would have a tendency to agree with you.
So how do we be respectful and supportive of non-binary people that we may know? It's not very hard, just like it isn't hard with anybody. You just respect somebody for being who they are. Even if you've just started to learn about somebody, they're a valid human being, so you need to respect it.
Of course, you should use the name that a non-binary person asks you to use. This is one of the most critical aspects of being respectful to a non-binary person. The name you may have been using for them may not reflect their gender identity. You do not ask them what their old name was.
You don't have to understand what it means to be non-binary in order to respect a person who is. So you may have heard a lot about non-binary genders or have trouble understanding them. That's okay. I mean, none of us know everything about everything. But identities that you don't understand still deserve your respect. Let's
see, this one?
Number three.
Three. Don't make any assumptions about people's gender. I mean, society has told us what each gender should look like, act like, be like, but we want to push that to the side. So don't make assumptions about a person's gender if you cannot tell they're non-binary by looking at them.
Which you often can't.
You often can't.
Just like it.
Just like you can't tell a transgender person their identity by how they look.
So one thing that we've started doing is, as you noticed at the beginning of this episode, in every episode we introduce ourselves with the pronouns that we use. For both of us, it's she, her, hers. If you aren't sure what pronouns somebody uses, just ask them. It will help you stop you from using the wrong ones. So different people, especially the non-binary people, may use different pronouns. He, she, they. Some of these may be a little awkward at first, especially if you're not used to saying it, especially they, when we're used to it meaning more than one. But it is one of the simplest and most respectful ways to validate someone and respect someone. And again, even if you're like, I'm a cisgender person who goes by she, her, I still put it in my email signature. So I'll use it when I introduce myself on the phone, that type of thing.
And I unfortunately do receive phone calls where I don't make it clear what my pronouns are, and I get typically misgendered. My voice is a little deeper than most women, I guess. Sorry, that was very categoric.
So we are trying to get in the habit of, hi, this is Amari. I go by she, her, hers when she answers the phone.
Yes, that's a good habit to get into. I'll have to work on it. Another thing we can do for non-binary folks is advocate for non-binary friendly policies. Non-binary people need to be able to live, dress, and have their gender respected at work, at school, and in public spaces.
Right. And part of that is using the bathroom. So for many non-binary people, it may be kind of awkward or even feel unsafe to use either the women's restroom or the men's restroom. People may verbally harass them or even physically assault them. They need to be supported by being able to use the restroom that they believe they will be safest in.
I was watching a video last night, in fact, on the National, NTCE?
Transgender Center for Equality.
Center for Equality, sorry. The acronym I know,
National Center for Transgender Equality.
Yes, and in that video, there was a non-binary person who unfortunately had to say that I have to choose the bathroom that I'm going to use where I feel the risk to myself and my body is least.
Yeah.
So imagine having to walk up to the women and men's doors for the bathroom and decide which one looks riskier today. I'll use the other one.
That's a horrible way to have to be.
Unfortunately, that also ends up being a point of contention with our lawmakers. They're usually called bathroom bills.
Yeah.
And
you hear about them, especially with transgender folks, but it's just as true for a non-binary person.
Another thing that you can do for non-binary people is to actually talk to them to learn more about who they are.
And that doesn't mean walking up to somebody and saying, hey, are you non-binary? I have some questions. Don't make assumptions. Don't be rude.
Everyone has a story, and you should listen to non-binary folks' stories as well, because of course there is no one way to be non-binary.
That's correct. So the National Center for Transgender Equality has this great list of alternate pronouns, and we'll post this on our websites, but it's a pronoun guide.
We're going to suck up another minute talking about this.
Yeah, just another minute.
It's interesting that last night I was reviewing this very sheet, and I decided that a non-binary person's pronouns shouldn't be something that sounds like or looks like the binary that we have today, the he, she.
That's your opinion, though,
that's
right?
my opinion, totally my opinion. And the very first one, I kind of like Faye, fair, fairs for a non-binary person.
Or airs.
which of course both of those don't sound like he or she.
Those are cool.
My 2 cents.
If I were non-binary, that's the one I would choose. You also got AM, airs, he, him, his, she, her, hers, her, hers, they, them, theirs, the, ver, vis, sie, them, zir, and zis, and they, here, and here's. And I apologize to everybody if I slaughtered some of those. But please respect what people use.
I would imagine over time, as more non-binary folks sort of decide what they want to be their pronouns, that we will end up sort of narrowing down the variety of pronouns to some subset.
Or maybe not.
Maybe.
So
I would just like to make a shameless plug here. This is a printout. Of course, it doesn't look very pretty, but this is the very first LGBTQ Northwest Indiana newsletter, and I'm already sending it out to those who have requested a newsletter in my trans support group. And if anyone would like to get onto my email list for the newsletter,
website right here.
I don't have a sign up on the website yet, but if you shoot me an email at info@lgbtq-nwi.org, I will add you to the list.
So, but we just had a couple more items. One was giving some resources. We have this great graphic that we'll send you so you can post it maybe during our next episode. Mm-hmm. But it's LGBTQ plus suicide prevention resources, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, like 1-800-273-8255. And there's that shorter one that's coming.
Actually, I think today, July 16th, was the day that is set to make the final decision on using 988 as the 3-digit suicide prevention hotline.
So there's a text number. Trevor Project has chat, text, space, a lifeline. There's a trans lifeline, which is support for transgender people by transgender people. And then SAGE LGBT elder hotline. And of course, there's always 911 for emergencies. And when we post this on our website, we have our phone numbers here on the outside edge too. So,
okay. We are planning at the moment to continue doing our shows every other week.
Which we now know is semi-weekly? No, semi-monthly.
Elizabeth and I had a debate yesterday about the use of the words like bi-weekly as opposed to semi-weekly and bi-monthly as opposed to semi-monthly.
Because we had heard bi-monthly used both ways.
I'm still a wee bit confused. But we think it's
No, we know that semi-monthly means twice a month. Semi-weekly means twice a week.
Which, of course, does semi-monthly won't apply because there are some months where we will be with you for 3 shows instead of 2.
Yeah, it's all kinds of confusion.
High-tech verbiage. At any rate, that would make our next program July 30th.
Yep. All right.
And with that, I think that's all for today.
That is.
Oh, that's wonderful information. And I just want to bring up, probably it's not an appropriate time to do so, but when we were talking about pronouns, there's a number that the number of them that Kelly uses for me that I feel highly conflicted and offended by. Should I be?
Maybe you should own it.
Well, that's what she told me to do, that I need to own it a couple of times when she's... boy.
I just wanted to mention our backdrop. These are actually our table runners that we have for when we are at events, passing out information, which of course we aren't doing right now. But they give some information, the logo, website, phone number, that sort of thing. So we might use those from time to time.
Oh, and on mine, you may notice at the bottom edge is actually a variety of LGBTQ community segment flags, with that being a pride flag, that being a trans flag. And I am positive that non-binary, genderqueer, and gender fluid are also in here, and possibly agender, although I will admit that I don't know them by heart.
Yeah, one time we did show a page of a variety of different flags, and that is a topic we're going to be going into to explain what some of the different flags are, especially maybe when we talk about the labels. So,
Yes.
but thank you again, Bill. We really
thank
appreciate
you.
Bill and Callie
Thank
show.
you.
And we appreciate your sponsors.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
honored that you would allow the use of our platform for your show. This is something that we have a great deal of pride in, and we're glad that we're able to provide a platform for you to share information on what's going on, and yeah. So by all means, we're happy that you're here.
All right, thank you.
And
Thank
we
you.
are very happy that you can actually provide that to us.
By all means, never
We look forward to
question.
seeing you next time.
Thank you
Say
from
that.
LGBTQ
And,
Northwest Indiana and PFLAG Crown Point TV.
and with that, we'll say goodbye for now, and we wish you all a safe weekend, and please be kind. With that, we'll say goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye.
This episode of The Bill and Callie Show is brought to you by Sip Coffee House 2 in Highland, Indiana on Jewett Avenue. Great coffee, lattes, smoothies, and more. Food and treats you will adore. Small town charm with big city selection. It's Sip Coffee House 2. If it's breakfast, brunch, or lunch you need, Les Cafe is the place to go, indeed. Open 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. 7 days a week. Les Cafe Pancake House, located in Highland, Indiana on Highway Avenue. Les Cafe, where less is more. Promise You Art House, a fun and vibrant place for local artisans to display and sell their creative works, owned and operated by artists for artists. Conveniently located at 8830 Kennedy Avenue in Highland, Indiana. For hours and events, visit pyarthouse.com or follow them on Facebook. Promise You Art House, where creativity reigns.